A familiar announcement echoed through Heathrow's Terminal 5. Flight BA 1396 to Manchester was now boarding. I mechanically scanned the last passenger's boarding pass, offering a faint, professional smile. As the aircraft doors sealed shut, a sigh of relief escaped me. Another flight safely dispatched. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 32 years old, an airport ground services agent. There was a time when I was cabin crew, soaring through unfamiliar skies, but 7 years ago, I voluntarily clipped my own wings. I chose the stability of ground duties to better care for my small family, to support my husband's climb up the corporate ladder, and to nurse my ailing mother-in-law. Mrs. Croft had been bedridden for years. 7 years. Not a long time, but long enough to erode the dreams of my youth. Long enough to transform a vibrant young woman who loved life into someone who knew only work, home, her child, and her mother-in-law. I believed my sacrifice was worthwhile. I thought I was creating a stable home, a steadfast pillar, so my husband, Julian, could focus on his work without worry. Julian was a senior sales director at a prestigious city firm. It was a position many coveted. Every time he was promoted, every time he sealed a major deal, I felt as proud and joyful as if it were my own achievement. Our son, Leo, was 5 this year. A bright, adorable boy. He was the bond that held us together and my infinite source of happiness. Life flowed on, peacefully but monotonously, until that fateful afternoon. "Eleanor, love, can I have a word?" It was Sarah Jenkins, a colleague from my team. She was a good-hearted woman, if a little too curious, and she was beckoning me from a corner of the staff room. Her expression was a mixture of apology and discomfort. "What is it, Sarah?" I asked, not pausing from sorting a stack of paperwork. Sarah hesitated, then held out her smartphone. "This is your Julian, isn't it?" On the screen was a remarkably clear photograph. My heart plummeted. The man in the picture had a familiar build, a familiar brilliant smile. It was unmistakably my husband, Julian. He was standing with his arm wrapped around the waist of a beautiful young woman, a lavish bar in a luxury seaside hotel behind them. The woman rested her head affectionately on his shoulder, her smile as sweet as honey. The backdrop was a vista of blue sea, palm trees, and dazzling golden sunlight. Cornwall. I recognized the scenery instantly. He told me he had a business trip to Glasgow. My voice was a dry, cracked whisper. My throat felt raw. Sarah looked at me with pity. "I'm so sorry, Elle. My niece works at that hotel. She sent me the photo, asking if I knew him because his face seemed familiar." She didn't need to finish her sentence. Everything was painfully clear. Julian had lied to me. There was no business trip to Glasgow. He was on holiday with another woman, a woman 10,000 times younger and more beautiful than me. The photograph was a dagger plunged straight into my heart. I couldn't breathe for the pain. 7 years of marriage. Was this brazen deceit the reward for 7 years of my sacrifice and devotion? I forced myself to maintain my composure, thanked Sarah, and stumbled back to my desk. My mind was a blank, buzzing void. I tried to recall the strange signs of late. The hushed phone calls he took on the balcony, the way he'd snap with irritation whenever I asked where he was going, the unexplained, large withdrawals from our joint bank account. I had been deceiving myself. I'd convinced myself he was just busy, stressed from work. But I was wrong. It was all just an elaborate excuse to hide this hideous truth. He had another woman. For the past 7 years, I had been living in a play he directed. I was the devoted wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, the mother who gave everything for her child. And he was the successful husband, the devoted son. But behind my back, he was a liar and a traitor. His smiles, his whispered words of love, his tender gestures towards me, all of it was fake. I sat motionless amidst the airport's cacophony, but the only sound I could hear was the shattering of my own heart. Hot, salty tears streamed down my cheeks. I felt so foolish, so pathetic. The world I had built, with all my strength, was crumbling before my very eyes. I drove home on autopilot. The familiar London streets I traveled every day suddenly felt alien. The house we shared, the place I considered my sanctuary, now appeared before me like a cold, gilded cage. As I stepped inside, I was met with a suffocating silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall and the ragged breathing from my mother-in-law's room. Mrs. Croft had been confined to her bed since a severe stroke 3 years ago. Yet, the illness had done nothing to diminish her cruelty and dogmatism. Even when she was healthy, she had never approved of me. She always believed that a girl from a modest background in the North was unworthy of her precious son. She criticized me for not being a good enough housekeeper, for not being deferential enough, for not immediately producing a grandson. Even when Leo was born, she was never satisfied, constantly comparing me to others. After her stroke, I had taken on all her care, from feeding to cleaning up after her. Julian was too busy, and his brother's family would only make a brief appearance before disappearing. Despite all this, she had never once looked at me with kindness. She saw my care as her right, my duty. Whenever she was displeased, she would scream, curse, and even throw things at me. I had gritted my teeth and endured it all, believing it was my burden to bear as her daughter-in-law. Today, my patience had reached its limit. I could bear it no longer. I went into her room, put down my bag, and forced a neutral tone. "Mother, I'm home. Would you like some soup?" Mrs. Croft glared at me sideways, the corner of her mouth twisted from the stroke, twitching with contempt. "Crawling back in now, are we? I thought you were off gallivanting with some man. Did you plan to starve me to death in here?" Her venomous words cut deeper into my already wounded heart. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Normally, I would have swallowed her insults in silence, but not today. "How can you say such a thing? I wasn't gallivanting. I was at work. The money I earn pays the bills for this house and for your medicine, doesn't it?" Startled by my defiance, Mrs. Croft's eyes widened. "Well, listen to you. Getting awfully bold now, are we? Earning your little pittance? If it weren't for my son, you'd be out on the street. How dare you talk back to me?" I didn't argue further. I didn't want to fight with a sick woman, but the rage in my chest was about to explode. I walked out, went to our bedroom, slammed the door, and finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I cried for my foolishness, for my stolen youth, for the betrayal of the man I had loved with all my heart, and for the cruelty of the woman I had dutifully served. In my despair, I reached for my only lifeline. With trembling hands, I dialed my mother's number. My mum lived in a quiet village in Devon. I had always thought of her as a gentle, patient woman, like many English mothers of her generation. "Hello, Eleanor, dear. What's wrong?" Her warm voice came through the receiver. Hearing her voice, all the suppressed sorrow and pain I'd been holding back burst forth at once. "Mum, Mum." I could only repeat her name, my voice choked with sobs. "Eleanor? What is it? What's happened? Has Julian done something to you?" Her voice grew urgent. I took a deep breath, and, through ragged sobs, I told her everything. About the photograph, Julian's lies, Mrs. Croft's cruelty, and my own pain and despair. I spoke in broken, disjointed sentences, my words punctuated by tears. On the other end of the line, my mother listened in silence. She didn't interrupt or offer premature platitudes. She simply waited until I had poured out every last drop of my emotion. When my tears had dried and my voice was hoarse, she finally spoke, her tone calm and steady. The earlier urgency was gone, replaced by a strange, resolute strength. "Stop crying, my girl. Tears won't solve anything. Now, you listen to me very carefully." I sniffled, listening intently. "First, from this moment on, you are to act as if nothing has happened. You will treat Julian and his mother exactly as you always have, as if you never saw that photograph. Can you do that?" "Yes. But it will be so hard, Mum. Hard or not, you will do it. This is the most important part. Second, I'm going to sort things out here and come up to London tomorrow. I'll help you with his mother so you can have some time to breathe." "Really, Mum?" "But, no buts," she cut me off. "And third, and this is the most crucial part, together, you and I are going to teach that treacherous husband and his vile mother a lesson they will never forget. I will help you get back everything that belongs to you, and Leo too. Do you trust me?" I was dumbfounded by my mother's transformation. Where was the gentle, patient woman I knew? The person on the phone was someone else, entirely an intelligent, sharp, and decisive woman. In the depths of my despair, her words were a life raft. I had no other choice but to trust her. "Yes, Mum, I trust you." "Good. Then do as I say. Leave everything to me." After hanging up, I sat numbly on the bed. The tears had stopped, but the pain remained. Yet, the feeling of despair was slowly being replaced by something else: anticipation. I was waiting for my mother, waiting for a plan for revenge. 2 days later, my mother arrived in London with a single small suitcase. Her sturdy frame, her neatly tied back gray hair, and above all, the bright, unwavering look in her eyes gave me a strange sense of calm. She didn't cry or curse her son-in-law as other mothers might. She was astonishingly composed. After a brief greeting to Mrs. Croft, who showed her open displeasure at the arrival of her provincial in-law, my mother pulled me into the bedroom and locked the door. She opened her suitcase. Inside, besides a few changes of clothes, were items that made me gasp. A tiny digital camera, several devices that looked like audio recorders, and a thick file of documents. "This is what I've prepared," she said, her voice low and clear. She showed me the camera. "This is a micro camera. I want you to install it in the living room and Mrs. Croft's room, in the most inconspicuous corners. It will record both sound and video. We need evidence of how she treats you." Next, she took out the file. As she turned the pages one by one, my world tilted on its axis once more. It was filled with photographs of Julian with not one, but several different women over the past few years. There was a girl who looked like a university student, another who was sophisticated and glamorous. They were dining together, going to the cinema, even entering and leaving hotels. "Mum, when? How? It's a shock, isn't it?" She looked me straight in the eye. "I've suspected Julian for a long time. A mother's intuition is rarely wrong. A year ago, I hired someone to look into him. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to break your heart. And back then, we didn't have enough evidence to bring him down. With a trembling hand, I took the photos. My heart felt like it was being torn to shreds. He hadn't just started this affair. He had been systematically deceiving me for years. I had been living with a monster in human skin. That's not all, my mother continued, her voice cold. She pointed to some documents in the file. They were copies of bank statements. This is the worst part. For the past 2 years, Julian has been secretly transferring money from your joint savings account, nearly £300,000. He moved it to a private account in his name, and with that money, he bought a luxury flat in Kensington and let one of those girls live in it. The room spun. £300,000. Money we had saved for years, penny by penny. I had sacrificed. I had worked hard. I had never bought myself anything expensive. It was all for our family, for Leo's future. And he had taken it all, squandering it on his sordid affairs with other women. My anguish now morphed into pure, unadulterated fury. The bastard, I seethed. I'm going to confront him right now. Wait. My mother grabbed my hand. If you lose your temper now, you'll ruin everything. You can't act rashly. Julian is cunning and calculating. If you make a scene, he'll deny it or even turn it around and blame you. Once he's hidden all the assets, you'll be left with nothing in a divorce. She looked at me with sharp, intelligent eyes. We have to be smart about this. I have a detailed plan. We're not just going to divorce him. We're going to destroy him socially and make him pay for everything he's done to you. Step by step, she began to explain her plan, her voice clear and dispassionate. The first phase was to gather more evidence of Julian's emotional abuse and Mrs. Croft's complicity. The second, and most brutal phase, was to use Mrs. Croft as a tool. We are going to put that woman out on the street, my mother said, without a flicker of hesitation. We will stage a performance so that the entire world can see the true faces of this devoted son and his respectable mother. Public opinion is a powerful weapon, my girl. Once his image is shattered, his career will be finished. I shuddered at her plan. To throw a sick old woman onto the street? Wasn't that too cruel? But then, the image of Julian with his arms around that young woman, the thought of my hard-earned money being thrown away on her, flashed through my mind. What little compassion I had left was extinguished by a wave of hatred. He and his mother had been far crueler to me. They deserved no pity. I'll do as you say, Mum, I said, my voice firm. I'll make him regret it. My mother nodded, a look of satisfaction on her face. Good girl. From this moment on, you are no longer a weak wife. You are a mother, fighting for her child, for her dignity, and for her future. Be strong. That night, I lay beside my mother, unable to sleep. Her plan replayed endlessly in my mind. A war was about to begin, a war without compromise, and I, the victim, was now ready to become a warrior. The next morning, I began to execute the first phase of my mother's plan. I needed to legitimize her presence in the house so that Julian and his mother wouldn't suspect a thing. As Julian was getting ready for work, I carefully broached the subject. Darling, I began, deliberately making my voice sound small and hesitant. I've not been feeling very well lately. I think it's the stress from work. And looking after your mother on my own is getting a bit much. I was thinking, maybe I could ask my mum to come up from Devon for a few weeks. It would be nice to spend some time with her, and she could help with your mum. What do you think? Julian, who was tying his tie, turned and looked me up and down. I tried my best to look exhausted and pathetic. Whether it was my pale complexion or some other reason, he nodded immediately. That's not a bad idea. It would be good to have your mother here. Less stress for you, and it saves me money. No need to hire a carer. His last words were like another knife in my heart. In his eyes, my mother was nothing more than a free caregiver. I lowered my head to hide the hatred in my eyes, mentally adding another item to his long list of debts. And so, my mother officially moved in with us. Julian didn't suspect a thing. In fact, he seemed pleased to be relieved of the burden of his own mother. He had no idea that her presence marked the beginning of his downfall. From the very first day, my mother got to work. She played the part of a simple, quiet countrywoman who just got on with her tasks. While Julian was at work, she skillfully installed the 2 micro cameras. One was hidden behind a potted plant in a corner of the living room, giving a clear view of the sofa where Mrs. Croft spent most of her day watching television. The other was placed discreetly on top of a wardrobe in Mrs. Croft's room, overlooking the entire space. It was all done perfectly, without a trace. With my mother there, my life certainly became more bearable. She took over the primary care for Mrs. Croft. She would cook nutritious broths and patiently spoon-feed her. She kept the room clean and fresh. Every evening, she would massage Mrs. Croft's stiff limbs. My mother did all of this silently and diligently, a stark contrast to Mrs. Croft's sharp and demanding nature. And, just as my mother had predicted, Mrs. Croft showed no gratitude for her care. If anything, she became more arrogant and abusive. Perhaps she assumed my mother, like me, was someone who had to endure her commands. "You, in-law, this soup is disgusting. Are you trying to poison me?" Mrs. Croft shrieked, knocking over the bowl of broth my mother had spent hours preparing. Hot liquid splashed across the floor and onto my mother's hand. My mother said nothing. She quietly cleaned up the mess with a cloth and went back to the kitchen to prepare another bowl. "What are you, a tortoise? So slow. Come and help me to the toilet, quickly, or I'll just do it in the bed. Why is this dress so dark? It's bad luck. Are you trying to wish death upon me? Change it, now." Every single one of Mrs. Croft's tirades and cruel acts was recorded by the hidden cameras. When Julian came home, she would transform back into a sweetly complaining invalid, whining that my mother wasn't looking after her properly, that things were better when I was doing it. Julian, as always, believed only his mother. He would snap at me. "Can't you do something about your mother? My mum is complaining nonstop. If you were going to bring someone in, you should have found someone more capable. Your mother is too old and slow to look after a patient." I would just bow my head and say, "Yes, dear," all the while laughing internally. Keep talking, keep acting. Every word and every action is becoming evidence against you. Whenever my mother was subjected to Mrs. Croft's abuse, she would pull me into my room and show me the footage she'd just captured. "See? This is what we need," she'd say calmly. Let her reveal her true nature. The more vicious and cruel she is, the more successful our little drama will be later on. Watching my mother calmly analyze the footage, I felt a mixture of awe and a slight shiver of fear. She had calculated everything so meticulously. She was like a grandmaster playing chess, and I was a crucial pawn on a board where victory had to be ours. While my mother focused on collecting evidence from Mrs. Croft, my mission was to find Julian's weaknesses. This part of the plan required patience and superb acting skills. Day after day, I continued to play the role of the tired but obedient wife. I no longer asked, where he was going, or what he was doing. I didn't overtly check his phone. Instead, I waited for an opportunity, and that opportunity came on a weekend night. Julian came home blind drunk after a night out with clients. He threw himself onto the bed and fell into a dead sleep, his phone tumbling onto the floor beside him. My heart pounded. This was it. I tiptoed over and picked up the phone. My hands trembled as I entered the passcode. Thankfully, he was still using my birthday, a bitterly ironic habit. The screen lit up, and Julian's other world opened up before me. The photo album didn't just contain the picture from Cornwall that Sarah had shown me. There were hundreds of other photos. Julian and his mistress, a woman named Chloe, were everywhere. In fine dining restaurants in London, on a yacht in the Mediterranean, at a resort in the Maldives. They were hugging, kissing, laughing happily. There were even photos taken in a hotel bedroom, with white sheets and romantic soft lighting. They looked like a genuinely happy couple. The sharp, cold pain twisted in my chest again. I took a deep breath, wiped away a tear, and continued my search for evidence. In his WhatsApp messages, I found their conversations. They called each other darling and babe. They shared details of their days and planned their next trips. And they talked about me. They called me the old hag, the baby-making machine, the baggage at home. Darling, just be patient with her a little longer, Chloe had messaged. Once things at your company are settled, you can kick her out. Then we can be together properly. I know, babe. I'll make up for all the hardship you're going through, Julian had replied, complete with heart emojis. I felt my limbs go cold as I read. He wasn't just having an affair. He had been planning to abandon me for a long time. But what horrified me even more was the financial evidence. In his emails and messages, I found flight booking confirmations, receipts for expensive gifts like designer handbags, watches, and jewelry, and most damning of all, bank transfer records. Hundreds of thousands of pounds had been transferred from Julian's account to Chloe's, with references like shopping money for my princess. The blood in my veins turned to ice. That was my money, my blood and sweat. I used that money to pay the electricity and water bills, to pay for Leo's nursery, to buy my mother-in-law's medication, and he was using it to support his mistress. It didn't stop there. In his internet search history, I found something even more terrifying. Top divorce lawyers in London. How to divide assets in a divorce without losing out. How a cheating spouse can win child custody. He was already preparing for a legal battle. He was planning to take everything from me, from the assets to my beloved son. With trembling hands, I used my own phone to photograph every screen, every picture, every message, every transfer record. I sent them all to a secret email account I had created. This would be my most powerful weapon in court. When I put his phone back, the sky was already growing light. I looked at the man sleeping soundly beside me. His face in sleep looked so peaceful, so innocent, but I knew that behind that facade lurked a monster, a selfish, cunning, and cruel monster. My love for him was dead, completely. All that remained in my heart was hatred and the resolve to make him pay. I quietly left the room and went to my mother's. She was still awake, waiting for me. Without a word, I showed her what I had found. She examined everything meticulously. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes glinted with a cold light. "Well done," she said. "We have almost all the evidence we need. It's almost time for us to deliver the final blow, my girl." "The time is ripe," my mother declared one evening, after we had reviewed all the evidence we had collected. Her voice was calm, but laced with a dangerous edge, and its power made me feel a surge of strength within myself. "Tomorrow, we begin the performance." My mother spent the afternoon on the phone. I didn't know who she was talking to, but I caught snippets of names, journalists, people with influence on social media. My mother, whom I had thought had spent her whole life in a quiet corner of the country, had connections I could never have imagined. She was mobilizing everything to create the grandest possible stage for her daughter. The next morning, we chose a weekend day when Julian had left early, using the excuse of another important client meeting. I knew exactly who his client was. My mother and I began our preparations. We dressed Mrs. Croft in her oldest, most pitiful-looking clothes. A pang of guilt pricked me, but my mother gave me a firm look. "Don't forget, they treated you worse than this," she said. "Feeling pity now is suicide." She handed me a small bottle of eye drops. "Use this if you need to, but I have a feeling your tears will be real." We put Mrs. Croft in her wheelchair, lying that we were taking her out for a stroll to get some fresh air. She seemed disgruntled, but didn't object, probably feeling cooped up in the house. My mother called a large taxi. We headed straight for the heart of London, Trafalgar Square. Being a weekend, it was swarming with people. As the taxi stopped, my heart began to hammer against my ribs. I was afraid. Afraid of the world's gaze. Afraid I wouldn't have the courage to play my part perfectly. My mother squeezed my hand tightly, her warmth and belief flowing into me. "Don't be afraid, my girl. Think of Leo. Think of your future, and your son's future. You are doing the right thing." We wheeled Mrs. Croft to the most visible spot on the pavement. My mother stepped back, melting into the crowd, ready to film the scene from a distance. The stage was now mine. I took a deep breath, allowing all the suppressed sorrow and pain to surge up. I didn't need the eye drops. Hot tears began to stream down my cheeks. I slumped down beside the wheelchair, buried my face in my hands, and began to sob. It started as a choked whimper, but grew into a heart-wrenching, desperate wail. The crowd began to notice. A few curious onlookers stopped. "Excuse me, love, is everything all right?" a middle-aged woman asked. I lifted my tear-streaked face and began my performance. My voice trembled and broke. "Please, madam, please help us. My husband has abandoned us." I began to pour out my story. How I had to give up my career to care for my bedridden mother-in-law. How my husband, a successful city executive, was having an affair and giving all our money to his mistress. How he refused to even look at his sick, elderly mother, leaving the entire burden on me. I spoke of my exhaustion, my struggles, how I couldn't even afford her medication. "He's left with a young, pretty girl. He said his mother is a burden. He told me if I couldn't handle it, I should just leave her on the street. What am I supposed to do now? I'm a woman too. I deserve to be loved. Why is life so unfair to me?" I cried out, my plea raw and miserable. Every word I spoke was a piece of the truth, embellished with my genuine pain and resentment. It wasn't acting. I was simply unleashing everything I had endured. My story struck a chord of sympathy. The crowd grew larger. The murmuring and whispering intensified. Smartphones were raised, pointing at me and Mrs. Croft. The curtain on our drama had officially risen. At first, Mrs. Croft was bewildered, unsure of what was happening. But as she heard my cries and saw the crowd gather, she realized she was the center of attention. Instead of staying silent, Her arrogant and cruel nature took over. She thought I was bad-mouthing her precious son. You shut your mouth this instant?" Mrs. Croft shrieked, her twisted mouth looking even more menacing. "You wretched, ungrateful creature. How dare you slander my son? My son is a devoted, successful man. He would never abandon his own mother." The sympathetic crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted into even louder murmurs. Mrs. Croft's words were like fuel on a fire. "Excuse me, madam," a man said. "Your daughter-in-law is clearly struggling. How can you speak to her like that? She's the one looking after you." Mrs. Croft glared at him. "What do you know about it? It's her duty to look after me. She'd be starving on the streets if it weren't for my son. It's a testament to how successful he is that he can attract other women. A woman who can't keep her husband has no right to complain." "My God, did you hear what that mother-in-law just said?" a young woman exclaimed. "Not only is she defending her son's affair, she's calling it a blessing for the wife. I can't believe it." Mrs. Croft's foolish words exposed everything. She had unwittingly confirmed that my story was true. The crowd's gaze, once a mix of suspicion and sympathy, now turned to outrage. Curses began to fly. Like mother, like son, the son's a scumbag. And the mother's a monster. That poor woman, married into a family from hell. Film it. Film it all. Put this family's true face online so the whole world can see. The smartphones were now aimed at us like a firing squad. Flashes went off repeatedly. Mrs. Croft, growing more enraged, screamed and hurled abuse, spitting out the most venomous words she could muster. She cursed me. She cursed the crowd. She even cursed my family. Every word she uttered painted her and Julian in an even uglier light. I continued to play my part. I simply sat there, weeping weakly and pathetically, letting the crowd's anger and Mrs. Croft's stupidity do the rest of the work. From a distance, my mother recorded the entire scene. And she didn't just film it. She was instantly sending the raw footage to her contacts in the media. Within minutes, our drama was no longer confined to a corner of Trafalgar Square. It began appearing on online forums and news sites with sensational headlines. Shocking. Wife clutches paralyzed mother-in-law. Weeping in street as city exec husband abandons them for mistress. Outrage as mother-in-law says, son's affair is a blessing for wife. The truth about the trash husband and demon mother-in-law goes viral. The video spread like wildfire. Within an hour, it had thousands of shares and tens of thousands of comments. My face, Mrs. Croft's face, and after some quick work by netizens, Julian's face, were plastered everywhere. The successful executive had, in the span of an afternoon, become a reviled trash husband, condemned by society. When my mother judged that the situation had reached its peak, she gave me a signal. I helped the now hoarse and exhausted Mrs. Croft into another taxi and hastily left the stage. Sitting in the car, watching the still debating crowd and the unceasing lights of smartphone cameras, I knew we had succeeded. The media firestorm had been unleashed, and it would soon sweep away everything Julian held dear. The media firestorm hit Julian faster and harder than I could have imagined. At that moment, he was sitting in a business-class lounge at the airport with his mistress, about to embark on another business trip, this time to the Amalfi Coast. He would have been sipping coffee, casually scrolling through his phone, perhaps smugly anticipating his upcoming holiday. And then he saw it. A friend had sent him a link to a news article with a message. "Mate, isn't this your wife? What the hell is going on?" I can picture Julian's expression at that moment, his relaxed face contorting into shock, then turning pale, and finally twisting into a mask of pure fury. He saw the image of me, weeping, the image of his mother in her wheelchair, and his own face being dragged through the mud everywhere. He read the comments, the curses and insults aimed at him and his family. The holiday was canceled immediately. Julian stormed out of the airport, hailed a cab, and raced home like a madman. He didn't call me once. He wanted a direct confrontation. When Julian kicked the door open and burst into the house, my mother and I were sitting calmly in the living room sipping tea. Mrs. Croft, sedated, was asleep in her room. The moment he saw me, Julian snarled like a wounded animal. "Eleanor! What the hell have you done?" He rushed towards me, raising his hand as if to strike. My mother shot up from her seat and stood in front of me. "Julian, calm yourself. If you have something to say it civilly. Don't you dare raise a hand. Get out of the way! This is between my wife and me." Julian tried to shove my mother aside, but she stood her ground. He pointed a trembling finger at my face, his eyes bloodshot with rage. "What do you want? Is this what you want? To ruin me? Why did you do this?" I followed the script my mother had prepared. I flinched, pretending to be utterly terrified. I just took your mother out for a walk. People saw me crying and asked what was wrong. I just told them the truth." "The truth?" Julian sneered. "The truth is you deliberately humiliated me and this entire family. Look at this. The whole world is cursing me. My career, my reputation. It's all ruined because of you. I didn't do it on purpose," I sobbed in a small voice. "It's because you had an affair and abandoned us. Isn't that the truth?" Fresh tears streamed down my face. Julian was speechless. He couldn't deny that fact. Just then, a noise came from Mrs. Croft's room. The argument must have woken her. She wheeled herself out into the living room. Seeing Julian, she began to wail as if he were her savior. "Julian, you're here! You have to stand up for me. Your wife dragged me out onto the street and made a public spectacle of me. That venomous snake. She's trying to kill us both." Julian turned to his mother, his anger flaring up again. "Mum, can you still say things like that? If you hadn't said such stupid things, this wouldn't have gotten so out of hand. Who told you to stand there and defend your son's affair in front of everyone?" Mrs. Croft froze, clearly not expecting to be scolded by her son. I was just trying to protect you. You're my son. Of course I'd take your side. Protect me? You've destroyed me. What am I going to do now? The company will find out. I'll be fired. I'll lose everything. This is all your fault." Being so brutally blamed by her son, Mrs. Croft's own temper flared. "You're blaming me now? You ungrateful brat. Who was it that covered everything up for you? Who sorted out that business with Clara? If it wasn't for me, you'd have been in prison long ago. How dare you speak to me like that?" "Stop it!" Julian screamed, his face a mask of horror. That short but intense exchange was captured in its entirety by a small audio recorder my mother had discreetly switched on and placed on the coffee table. Clara, Julian's first wife. What had happened to her? Mrs. Croft's words had just revealed a secret far more terrible than infidelity. My mother and I exchanged a look. We had just stumbled upon a piece of evidence more valuable than gold. In their rage, Julian and his mother had dug their own graves. Julian realized he had made a fatal slip. He stopped arguing with his mother and tried to take his anger out on me. but it was useless. I just kept crying, and my mother shielded me. In the end, he punched the wall hard once, then stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. That night, the house was filled with a suffocating tension and silence. But in my mother's room, a new flame of hope was burning. We now held the final trump card that would finish Julian for good. The social media storm was just the beginning. The real attack, the one that would sever Julian's lifeline, was launched by my mother and me the very next morning. We gave him no time to recover. My battle-hardened mother carefully drafted an anonymous letter. It contained no profanity or malicious language. Instead, it was written in a very objective and professional tone, as if from a concerned third party, outraged by the incident. The letter was sent to the shared email address of the executive board and HR department of Julian's company. The letter detailed the incident in Trafalgar Square, emphasizing that Julian, a sales director representing the company's public face, had engaged in immoral behavior and violated family law. But that wasn't all. My mother cleverly attached our most powerful pieces of evidence. The photos of Julian and Chloe were arranged chronologically, proving their illicit relationship was long-standing. There were also receipts and bank transfer records showing the vast sums he had spent on his mistress. The killer blow was this. My mother highlighted expenditures Julian had claimed as client entertainment or business travel on his expense reports, which were actually used to fund his affair. He had been abusing his position to subtly embezzle company funds. The letter ended with a poignant question. Is a manager with such a dissolute private life, questionable morals, and a history of dishonest conduct truly qualified to represent the image and interests of a major corporation? We sent the email from an internet cafe to leave no trace. Shortly after, Julian's phone began ringing off the hook. He had barricaded himself in the bedroom. I could hear his panicked voice, explaining and making excuses, but it was too late. By the afternoon, an internal memo was circulated at Julian's company. He was suspended indefinitely, pending an investigation into the allegations. The image of the competent, promising manager he had so carefully cultivated was utterly destroyed. Simultaneously, his mistress, Chloe, began to feel the heat. Her photos and personal details were ruthlessly unearthed by netizens. She was branded a shameless homewrecker and a family destroyer. Her social media accounts were flooded with abusive and accusatory messages. The pressure from the public, her family, and friends became unbearable. That evening, Chloe called Julian. I deliberately walked past his door to overhear their conversation. "Julian, it's over." Chloe's voice, choked with tears, came through the phone. "I can't take this anymore. This is all your fault. My life is ruined because of you. Everyone is looking at me like I'm a criminal." "Chloe, calm down. Just listen to me. I can fix this," Julian pleaded desperately. "Fix it? How? You can't even fix your own life. You've been fired. You have no money. Your reputation is gone. I don't want to be involved with someone like you anymore. Don't ever contact me again." Chloe hung up. Julian was devastated. I heard him slam his fist on the desk and let out a string of furious curses. The mistress he had doted on, the woman he planned a future with, had abandoned him the moment he ran into trouble. That was the price of betrayal. I went back to my room and told my mother. She just smiled faintly. Love built on lies and money always ends in betrayal and calculation. Let them tear each other apart. The night grew deeper, but the storm in this house was just beginning. Julian had lost his career and his mistress. Now, all he had left was hatred. and he would undoubtedly be looking for a way to get revenge. We had to prepare for the next battle. Having lost everything in a matter of days, Julian turned into a cornered beast. He no longer maintained his polished, calm facade. He directed all his rage and failure at me. "This is all your fault. You've ruined my life," he would snarl at me whenever we crossed paths. "You think you've won? I won't let you get away with this." He didn't lay a hand on me, probably out of fear of my mother or of me gathering more evidence. Instead, he tortured and harassed me with words. He called me a vicious bitch, an ungrateful snake who bites the hand that feeds it. He cursed me, saying I would never be happy, but we had anticipated all of this. My mother had instructed me to maintain absolute silence, not to fight back, not to argue. My silence only enraged him further, and when he couldn't get a reaction from me, he resorted to the most despicable tactic. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, 2 uniformed police officers appeared at our door. They informed me they had received a report from a concerned citizen that I was abusing and neglecting my old, sick mother-in-law. The person who made the report was, of course, Julian. I was speechless. I couldn't believe his audacity. He was the one who had neglected his own mother, and now he was trying to frame me. Julian stood behind the 2 officers, looking at me with a triumphant smirk. He thought he had me cornered. He was trying to use the law to get his revenge and tarnish my reputation, but he was wrong. My mother and I were prepared for this. "Please, come in, officers," my mother said calmly. "We are more than willing to cooperate and clear this up." As the officers sat down, my mother began her explanation. She was not flustered at all. She took out a tablet and played the videos recorded by the hidden cameras. "Officers, this is the evidence of how my daughter has been caring for her mother-in-law and how Mrs. Croft has been responding." The screen showed clear footage, me patiently feeding Mrs. Croft while she hurled abuse at me cleaning up the food she had deliberately spilled, my mother massaging her while she made snide remarks. The officers watched, shaking their heads. "That's not all," my mother continued. "Mr. Croft claims my daughter assaulted his mother. In that case, please watch this." She played another clip. It showed Mrs. Croft trying to reach for the remote control on a table, losing her balance, and falling out of her wheelchair. The next moment, I rushed out from the kitchen and helped her up. No one else was in the room. She had fallen on her own. Julian's face turned ashen. He stammered, "No, that's not right. She's manipulated the footage. It's a setup." One of the officers turned to him, his voice firm. "Mr. Croft, we will have these videos authenticated. But from what we can see, your report appears to be entirely baseless. Making a false accusation is a serious offense. I suggest you reconsider your actions." The 2 officers left, leaving Julian standing dumbfounded in the middle of the living room. His revenge had failed spectacularly. Far from harming me, he had only succeeded in making himself look like a contemptible liar. That night, he didn't shout anymore. He sat alone in the dark, drinking. His aggression had been replaced by a sense of failure and despair. He had lost, and it was a humiliating defeat. But the war wasn't over. There was still one last secret, a terrible truth we were about to unveil. After his failed attempt at framing me, Julian became even more dangerous. He stopped shouting, but his silence was more menacing. He would glare at my mother and me with eyes full of hatred, as if he could devour us. A few times he came home drunk and smashed things around the house, muttering threats. Sensing the escalating danger, my mother and I, along with our lawyer, applied for an emergency restraining order. The application included the audio recording of Julian's argument with his mother, photos of the broken furniture, and my sworn statement about his threats. The court granted it swiftly. Julian was forbidden from coming within 100 meters of me, our son, and our home. At the same time, to prevent him from siphoning off any remaining assets, my lawyer requested a court order to freeze all of Julian's personal property bank accounts and real estate until the divorce was finalized. Julian was served with the court orders at the house. He read them, his face went white, and his hands began to shake. He had been kicked out of his own home, and his financial lifelines were cut. He was well and truly cornered. As Julian quietly packed a bag to leave, he didn't look at me, but I could feel the searing hatred in his gaze. When the door slammed shut, I finally let out a breath of relief. For the first time in a long time, my mother and I had a moment of peace. But just as I thought I could finally rest, an unexpected phone call dragged me into the eye of an even bigger storm. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Vance?" A young woman's voice, vaguely familiar, came through the phone. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" It's Chloe." "Chloe?" Julian's mistress. My heart sank. Why was she calling me? To mock me? To provoke me? "What do you want?" My voice was ice. Please don't hang up." Chloe's voice was desperate. "I'm not calling to fight. I want to help you. I have something I think you'll really need." I remained silent, suspicious. Chloe continued, her voice trembling. "Julian, he's a monster. I was so stupid to ever trust him. After you exposed him, he came to find me, threatened me, demanded money. He said if I didn't do what he said, he'd make me regret it. I'm so scared, Eleanor." Chloe started to cry. During one of our fights, he let something slip. Something horrible. About his first wife, Clara, the name Clara again. This time, not from Mrs. Croft, but from Julian's own mistress. "What about her?" I asked, my heart pounding violently. He said Clara's death wasn't an accident, not an allergic reaction to medicine. He said he did it himself. Apparently, Clara had found out he was cheating, just like you did, and wanted a divorce. He was terrified of losing his reputation and his assets, so he killed her, cleverly. My entire body went cold. The words, Mrs. Croft had blurted out were true. Julian wasn't just a cheat and an abuser. He was a murderer. "How can I believe you?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm. "I have proof," Chloe said immediately. "He told me everything when he was drunk. He said he swapped Clara's sedative with a drug that would induce a fatal anaphylactic shock. What he didn't know was that there was a CCTV camera installed in the hospital corridor that day. He managed to get the original footage and destroy it, but I secretly made a copy, just in case. I'll send it to you. I just ask one thing in return. When this goes to court, please go easy on me. I was a victim too. He deceived me." Immediately after the call, Chloe emailed me the video file. My mother and I opened it with trembling hands. The footage was grainy and silent, but its contents were horrifying enough to make one's blood run cold. It showed Julian sneaking into Clara's hospital room in the middle of the night. He looked around furtively, then quickly took a syringe from his pocket and injected its contents into his wife's 4-drip. Then he calmly walked out of the room. A few hours later, alarms on Clara's heart monitor blared, and nurses rushed in. Everything was sickeningly clear. This was no longer evidence of an affair. It was evidence of murder. My mother and I sat in stunned silence. The hatred inside me, had now turned into a profound fear and revulsion. I had lived with a cold-blooded murderer for 7 years. "Mum, what do we do now?" I asked, trembling. My mother, after a moment of shock, regained her characteristic composure. She took my hand, her gaze firm. "Don't be afraid, my girl. Justice will be served. That monster must pay for his crimes. We're taking this to our lawyer first thing in the morning." This divorce case just became something else entirely. The day of the final divorce hearing arrived. The air in the courtroom was solemn and tense. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by my mother and my solicitor, Mr. Azinpund. Harris, a calm, middle-aged man with sharp eyes. On the other side sat Julian, looking gaunt and haggard. He stared at me with sunken, hate-filled eyes. Beside him sat a slick, confident-looking young barrister. The proceedings began. Julian's side went first. His barrister attempted to paint me as a jealous, manipulative wife who had fabricated everything to destroy her husband's reputation and seize his assets. He argued that the evidence of infidelity was a misunderstanding, that Julian was simply maintaining professional relationships. My lord, my client, Mr. Julian Croft, is a man who deeply loves his wife and child and a devoted son. He may have neglected his family at times due to work-related stress, but Mrs. Vance, rather than trying to understand, reacted with baseless suspicion and even resorted to the cruel act of dragging her elderly, sick mother-in-law onto the street to publicly humiliate her husband. This demonstrates Mrs. Vance's malicious character and proves she is unfit to have custody of their son. Listening to his shameless lies, I could only clench my fists. Mr. Harris gave me a reassuring look. Then they called their star witness, Mrs. Croft. She was wheeled into the courtroom, looking frail and pathetic, a far cry from her usual arrogant self. She had clearly been well coached by Julian's legal team. "Mrs. Croft, could you please tell the court how your daughter-in-law, Eleanor Vance, treated you while you lived with her?" Julian's barrister asked in a sympathetic tone. Mrs. Croft began to sob. "It was terrible, sir. She abused me, starved me, cursed at me. She even pushed me over once. She said I was a burden, a waste of space. She conspired with her own mother to throw me out of the house. She wept pitifully, painting me as the most unfilial and wicked daughter-in-law in the world." Julian nodded along, feigning concern for his mother. They were putting on a perfect performance for the court. When Mrs. Croft's testimony ended, a hush fell over the courtroom. All eyes were on me, a mixture of pity and condemnation. It was my solicitor's turn. Mr. Harris rose, unhurried, and posed a single, calm question to Mrs. Croft. "Mrs. Croft, are you certain that everything you have just said is the truth?" "Of course it's the truth. I may be old, but my mind is perfectly clear," she stated firmly. "Very well." Mr. Harris turned to the judge. "My lord, to prove that the witness's testimony is entirely false, we would like to submit a video into evidence." The large screen in the courtroom flickered to life. The first clip showed Mrs. Croft throwing the soup bowl and cursing at my mother. The next showed her falling from her own wheelchair, with me rushing to her aid. This was followed by numerous other clips of her being cruel to me and my mother. Mrs. Croft's face turned from white to purple. She stammered, "No, that's been doctored. They set me up." Julian's barrister was frozen. He clearly had not expected us to have such damning evidence. But this was not the final blow. Mr. Harris continued, "My lord, the witness's behavior was not spontaneous. She was acting under the instruction and coercion of her own son, the defendant, Mr. Julian Croft. We would like to submit one more piece of evidence, an audio recording. The recording of Julian's argument with his mother played out. Julian's voice, shouting and blaming his mother, and then Mrs. Croft's fatal words echoed clearly through the court. "Who sorted out that business with Clara? If it wasn't for me, you'd have been in prison long ago." The entire courtroom gasped. Who was Clara? What had happened? The judge had to bang his gavel to restore order. Julian slumped in his chair, all the color drained from his face. He knew it was over. Their play had ended in humiliation, with only the most terrible truth waiting to be revealed. After the audio recording played, a heavy silence descended upon the courtroom. All eyes were fixed on Julian and Mrs. Croft, who were pale and trembling. The judge, his face stern, looked directly at Julian and asked, "Mr. Croft, who is this Clara mentioned in the recording? And what is her relation to you?" Julian kept his head bowed, silent, as beads of sweat rolled down his face. His barrister scrambled to his feet to do damage control. "My lord, that was merely a comment made in anger. It has no legal standing and is not relevant to today's divorce proceedings." "Not relevant?" "My solicitor, Mr. Harris, cut him off sharply. My lord, we believe it is highly relevant. It speaks to the defendant's true character, that of a man who will stop at nothing, who feels no remorse, to achieve his own ends." Mr. Harris nodded at me, giving me the signal. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my wildly beating heart. This was the decisive moment. "My lord," Mr. Harris's voice resonated through the court, "the Clara mentioned is Miss Clara Evans, the defendant, Mr. Julian Croft's first wife. Her death 5 years ago was officially ruled as an accident, a fatal anaphylactic shock following a medication error. A tragic accident." He paused for dramatic effect. But was that the truth? Today, we have one final piece of evidence. Evidence that will expose all of the defendant's lies and wickedness. With the court's permission, we would like to play a video. The judge nodded. The large screen lit up once more. This time, it wasn't a domestic scene, but grainy CCTV footage with a date and timestamp from 5 years prior in the corner. The entire court held its breath. The video showed an empty hospital corridor in the dead of night. The door to a room opened, and Julian slipped inside. He was younger then, but his eyes already held the same cunning look. He glanced around before approaching the bed of a sleeping woman, undoubtedly Clara. He took a small syringe from his pocket and swiftly injected its contents into the IV drip hanging by her bed. His movements were precise and cold. Having done the deed, he calmly walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. The video stopped there, but the silence in the courtroom was more deafening than an explosion. Everyone was horrified. Mrs. Croft stared blankly at her son, then fainted in her wheelchair. Julian completely broke down. He stared at the screen, his face contorted in disbelief. He had never dreamed that the evidence of a crime he thought was buried forever would be broadcast for the entire world to see. "No, that's fake. It's all fake." Julian suddenly screamed like a madman. He jumped up and pointed at me. "It was her. She framed me. She's trying to kill me. That woman is the devil." He lost all reason and lunged towards me. But the court bailiffs immediately tackled and restrained him. His crazed shouts and curses filled the courtroom. "Order! Remove the defendant!" the judge commanded, striking his gavel hard. As Julian was dragged away, he continued to struggle and scream. His performance as a successful husband and devoted son had ended with the unmasking of a crazed murderer. The whole truth was out, and though it was long overdue, the light of justice had finally shone through. After Julian was removed, and Mrs. Croft was taken for medical attention, the court reconvened after a short recess. The air was still heavy with the horrific truth that had just been revealed, but the tension had subsided somewhat. Julian's barrister, his face ashen, offered no further defense. The evidence was too overwhelming. Words were meaningless. The judge, after conferring with the jury, rose to deliver the final verdict. His firm, clear voice echoed in the absolute silence of the courtroom. Having reviewed the entire case file, the evidence submitted, and all proceedings of this trial, this court finds that the defendant, Mr. Fading, Julian Croft, has committed acts that constitute a severe violation of the marital contract, including emotional abuse towards the plaintiff, Miss Eleanor Vance, and a failure to fulfill his duty of care towards his mother, Mrs. Croft. These actions have inflicted profound mental and physical harm upon the plaintiff and are the primary cause of the breakdown of this marriage. The judge paused and looked directly at me. The court hereby grants the plaintiff Eleanor Vance's petition for divorce. The marriage between Eleanor Vance and Julian Croft is officially dissolved as of today. Hearing those words, I let out a deep sigh of relief. I was finally free. The judge continued, regarding the custody of the child, considering the defendant Julian Croft's moral failings and inappropriate conduct, he is deemed unfit and unqualified to raise the child. The court therefore rules that the plaintiff, Eleanor Vance, will have sole custody of the child, Leo Croft, until he reaches the age of 18. The defendant, Julian Croft, is obligated by law to pay monthly child support. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of happiness. I could keep my son. Regarding the division of marital assets, considering the defendant, Julian Croft's gross misconduct during the marriage and the plaintiff Eleanor Vance's contributions to the formation and maintenance of those assets, the court rules as follows. The plaintiff, Eleanor Vance, is awarded 70% of the total value of the marital assets, including full ownership of the current residence and corresponding savings. The defendant, Julian Croft, will receive the remaining 30%. Furthermore, the defendant is liable to pay the plaintiff a sum of £500,000 in compensation for emotional distress. My mother and I looked at each other, unable to hide our joy. We hadn't just won, we had won completely. Justice was on our side. Finally, the judge made the most important ruling of all, regarding the new facts that have come to light during these proceedings, specifically concerning the death of the defendant's former wife, Miss Clara Evans. This court finds that there is a strong suspicion of a grave criminal offense. The court therefore orders that all relevant evidence, including the audio recording and the CCTV footage, be transferred to the Crown Prosecution Service to initiate a full investigation into Mr. Julian Croft on suspicion of murder and into his mother, Mrs. Croft, on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. This judgment is effective immediately. The judge's gavel came down, bringing the tumultuous trial to a close. I had won. I had regained my freedom, my dignity, my child, and everything that belonged to me. And Julian, he had not only lost everything, but he would now face the full force of the law for his heinous crimes. As the courtroom doors closed behind me, a brighter, new door was opening in my life. Stepping out of the courthouse, I found the London sky was unusually clear and blue. A brilliant golden sunlight cascaded onto my shoulders like a warm, comforting embrace. I took a deep breath, savoring the air of freedom. The war was over. The 7-year nightmare had finally ended. My mother squeezed my hand, her eyes sparkling with joy. I told you, my girl, justice is always on the side of the good. We won. Instead of going straight home, we went to a quiet restaurant to celebrate. It was the most delicious meal I had eaten in years. There were no more burdens, no more worries, just the two of us and the happiness of liberation. News of the trial spread quickly. The media went into another frenzy. This time, Julian was no longer just a trash husband. He was a cold-blooded murderer. The public outrage intensified as the details of his crime were revealed. His former company immediately issued a public statement, officially terminating his employment, declaring they would not tolerate any employee who violated the law and basic morality. It seemed every door had been slammed shut in Julian's face. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Croft, after waking up in the hospital and learning of the court's decision, and that she herself could be charged for her role in the cover-up, did something no one could have predicted. To save herself, she voluntarily contacted the police and submitted a sworn statement implicating her own son in Clara's death. She detailed how she had helped create Julian's alibi and clear the scene. She did it all in the hope of receiving a more lenient sentence. The sacred bond of motherhood had been shattered by a moment of selfishness and fear. When I heard the news, I could only smile wryly. What goes around, comes around. Julian had been dealt a final, fatal blow by the very person he trusted most, the mother who had been his accomplice. That was perhaps the most bitter punishment of all for him. A few days later, I returned to my routine. My colleagues at the airport looked at me differently. There was curiosity and sympathy, but mostly there was respect. Sarah rushed over and gave me a tight hug. "Eleanor, you're amazing. I'm so proud of you. This is how strong we women have to be." I smiled. I was no longer the weak, submissive Eleanor of the past. I had shed that skin. The terrible storm hadn't broken me. It had forged me, making me stronger and more resilient. I was ready to start a new life. A life with just me, my son, and the peaceful days that lay ahead. Life without Julian and Mrs. Croft was surprisingly serene. There was no longer a tense, suffocating atmosphere in the house, no more bickering or backbiting. Instead, it was filled with Leo's clear laughter and the warmth of our shared meals. I spent more time with my son, taking him to the park and reading him bedtime stories every night. Watching him sleep with a smile on his face, I knew that all my sacrifices and struggles had been worth it. At work, after the dust had settled, my superiors began to see my capabilities and dedication in a new light. They recognized the professionalism and composure I had shown even in the midst of the storm. A few months after the trial, an unexpected opportunity came my way. The position of head of ground services became vacant, and I was recommended as a candidate. Thanks to my years of experience and my recent performance, I was officially appointed. I had gone from being an ordinary staff member to a manager. It wasn't just a promotion, it was an affirmation, a recognition of my own worth that I had lost for so long. My life was gradually settling into a new, stable, and bright trajectory. I thought this was how I would live from now on, devoting all my love to my son and caring for my aging mother. I no longer believed in love and didn't have the courage to open my heart to any man. The scars Julian had left were too deep, but life always has unexpected turns. I met David at a cross-departmental meeting at the airport. He was the head of the security screening team, a tall, well-built man in his late 30s with a kind face. What struck me most were his warm smile and sincere eyes. During the meeting, when I pointed out some issues in our collaborative process, a few people looked uncomfortable, but David listened with intense focus. He not only agreed with my suggestions, but also offered a very reasonable solution from a security perspective. His calm, respectful, and constructive manner immediately impressed me. After the meeting, he approached me. "Hello, Eleanor. I'm David Miller. Your presentation today was very impressive." "Thank you," I smiled, a little shyly. "Your insights were really helpful, too." We talked a bit more about work. I found him to be intelligent, understanding, and responsible. Unlike Julian, who was all flash and no substance, David exuded a dependable sense of stability. From that day on, we would occasionally run into each other at the airport. Each time he would greet me with a warm smile. Sometimes he would hand me a hot cup of coffee, saying, "You look tired." His small, thoughtful gestures warmed my heart. Our relationship developed naturally and slowly. He never asked about my past. I was sure he must have heard my scandalous story, but he simply remained a quiet presence, listening to me talk about my work and my son. He told me about his security team and his hobbies, like reading and gardening. One day, as we were having coffee after work, I gathered my courage and asked him, "Aren't you curious about my past?" David looked at me, his gaze still warm. "I don't believe a person's past defines who they are in the present," he said. "The Eleanor I see is a strong woman, a wonderful mother, and a capable manager. For me, that's more than enough." His words made my heart flutter. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and respected. A small bud of trust and hope began to sprout in my parched heart. I thought from now on, there would only be sunny days, but unexpected dark clouds gathered once more. My mother, my steadfast rock, had recently developed a persistent cough and had been losing weight rapidly. At first, we both dismissed it as the change in weather and her age. But when her symptoms didn't improve, I took her for a full medical checkup. The moment I held the results, the ground fell away from beneath my feet. My mother was diagnosed with early-stage lung cancer. That dreadful disease, something I had only ever heard about in dramas, had now struck the person I loved most in the world. I nearly collapsed in the hospital corridor. The fear of losing my mother was 10,000 times worse than the pain of betrayal. But my mother herself was calmer than anyone. She held my hand and said in her still firm voice, "It's early stage. What's there to be afraid of? Medical science is so advanced these days. It's not a death sentence. I still have to watch my daughter be happy and see Leo get married." Her optimism pulled me back from the brink. I wiped my tears and told myself I had to be strong. My mother had fought for me. Now it was my turn to fight for her. I immediately took leave from work and put everything on hold to focus on her care. I sought out the best doctors and researched the latest treatments. I cooked nutritious meals for her and took her for walks every day to lift her spirits. While my mother was in the hospital, David visited almost every day. He didn't offer many empty words of comfort. He would just quietly bring a flask of warm tea, a few good books, or simply sit and play chess with my mother. He was also wonderful with Leo, explaining to him that Grandma was just a little tired and would be well soon. His quiet but steadfast presence was a great source of strength for the three of us. One evening, when my mother and I were alone in her room, She suddenly took my hand and told me something I had never heard before. Do you know why I was so determined to help you when you were going through that trouble with Julian? I shook my head. My mother looked out the window, her gaze distant. Because I didn't want you to follow in my footsteps. Your father, he was also a man who betrayed me. I was shocked. My father had died when I was very young. In my memory, he was a kind man who loved his wife and child. My mother smiled sadly. That's the image I wanted you to have of him. But the truth is, he also had an affair and caused me a great deal of pain. Back then, like you, I wanted to give up on everything, but I couldn't, because of you. I chose to be silent and patient to give you a complete family. But I was wrong. My patience didn't bring happiness. It only made me live in misery. And it didn't stop a man who wanted to leave. I lived my whole life being weak and submissive. So when the same thing happened to you, I vowed that my daughter would never repeat my mistakes. You have to live differently from me. You have to be strong and fight for your own happiness and dignity. Tears welled up again as I listened to her. I hugged her tightly. Behind my mother's sharp, decisive exterior was a past filled with pain and sacrifice. She had turned her own suffering into strength to protect her daughter. I felt pity for her, and my respect for her grew even deeper. Don't worry, Mum, I said through my sobs. I will live a truly happy life, and you will be there to see it. You have to get well. You must. My mother smiled and stroked my head. I know, my girl. A little trial like this won't defeat me. This trial didn't defeat me either. It made me realize the value of family and love, and it showed me that even in the darkest moments, there would be a hand to pull me up, my mother's hand, and David's warm hand. Thanks to aggressive treatment, my mother's health improved remarkably. The doctors said that thanks to early detection and her positive attitude, the treatment was highly effective. She was discharged to recuperate at home while awaiting surgery, and our lives returned to a peaceful rhythm. But as the saying goes, the tree wishes to be still, but the wind will not cease. One weekend evening, David was at our house, spending time with us, when the doorbell rang insistently. I went to open it and froze. It was Julian. He looked even more haggard and pathetic than the last time I had seen him in court. He was thin, unshaven, and reeked of stale alcohol. He stared at me with bloodshot, resentful eyes. I want to see Leo. Let me see my son, he slurred, trying to force his way inside. I quickly blocked his path. Go away. The court ordered you to stay away from us. To hell with the order! He's my son! I have a right to see him! Julian shoved me. Just then, David came out from inside and stood in front of me, a solid shield. He said nothing, simply blocking the way with his large frame. Seeing David, Julian's jealousy and anger flared. Who the hell are you? Oh, it's you. You're the one who stole my wife and son, he roared, lunging forward to throw a punch. But David, with his professional training as a security officer, easily sidestepped the blow and quickly subdued him. Mr. Croft, you're drunk. Please leave. David's voice was calm, but firm. Don't make me take stronger measures. Hearing the commotion, Leo ran out of his room. Seeing the frightening sight of Julian, the boy screamed in terror and clung to David's legs. David, I'm scared. Make that man go away. His own son's actions were the final dagger in Julian's heart. He stopped struggling, watching his son seek protection from another man. His aggression drained away, replaced by a look of utter defeat and anguish. He said no more and stumbled away, his back a long, lonely shadow under the dim streetlights. After Julian left, David turned and comforted Leo, scooping him up, wiping his tears, and telling him a funny story to make him forget his fear. Watching them, my heart felt warm. That night, after my mother and Leo were asleep, David and I sat in the living room. I thanked him for protecting us. David looked at me, his eyes softer and more serious than ever. "Eleanor," he said, "I don't want to be the person who only protects you in moments like this. I want to be there to care for and protect you and Leo every single day." He got down on one knee and took a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant silver ring. "Eleanor Vance, will you marry me?" I was speechless, frozen. Tears welled up again, but this time, they were tears of surprise and joy. "I'm divorced. I have a child. Are you sure?" I stammered. David stood up and took my hand. "I'm sure. I love you, Eleanor. I love all of you, including your past and your scars. I love Leo as if he were my own son. I won't force you to forget the past. I just ask that you let me walk with you into the future. We can even sign a prenuptial agreement if that would make you feel more secure. I don't need anything of yours. I just need you and Leo." His sincere words broke down all the barriers and fears in my heart. I had found a man who truly loved and respected me. Through tears of happiness, I nodded. "Yes, yes, I will." David broke into the warmest smile in the world. He gently slipped the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. Our wedding wasn't grand. It was a small, intimate ceremony at a riverside restaurant, blessed by my mother Leo and our closest friends and colleagues. I wore a simple white dress and light makeup, but I knew I had never looked so beautiful or radiant. My smile was no longer forced. It was a genuine expression of happiness from the bottom of my heart. David stood by my side, never letting go of my hand, looking handsome and dependable in his suit. Leo, in a matching miniature suit, ran around excitedly, constantly calling out for Daddy David. He had completely accepted him as his own father. My mother sat in the front row, a contented smile on her face, her eyes filled with joy and satisfaction. Our married life was peaceful and sweet. David was a wonderful husband and father. He always came home on time, helped with the housework, and tutored Leo with his homework. He never forgot an anniversary and always prepared small surprises for me. He respected my work, always listening to my concerns and offering sincere advice. With him, I felt an absolute sense of peace and security. Leo adored his daddy David more and more each day. Every night, the two of them would read books and laugh together. David taught him how to play football and how to fix his broken toys, filling the void of fatherly love that he had never had before. While our little family was basking in happiness, we would occasionally hear news about Julian and Mrs. Croft. Julian, after being charged, had completely fallen apart. He became an alcoholic, living a transient life without a job. The little money he had left from the asset division was quickly spent on drink. Mrs. Croft received her sentence for her role in the cover-up, but the more bitter punishment was that after her release, she had nowhere to go. Her precious son Julian had dumped her in a rundown nursing home and never visited once. She lived out her remaining days in solitude and sickness, likely filled with endless regret. When I heard these stories, my heart no longer felt any sense of triumph. Instead, it felt strangely calm. I had come to realize that hatred is like a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die. It only makes you more tired and pained. It was only when I learned to let go of the past and forgive those who had hurt me that I found true peace for my soul. Happiness doesn't come from revenge. It comes from building a better, new life. My mother's surgery was a success. The tumor was completely removed. Thanks to her positive attitude and the devoted care of her family, she recovered very quickly. A few months later, she was able to walk and live almost normally. Seeing her playing happily with her grandson in the small garden David had planted for her, I felt I could ask for nothing more. One sunny afternoon, our family went for a walk in the park. David held my hand with one hand and carried Leo on his shoulders with the other. Our son's bright laughter mingled with the sound of the wind and the rustling of leaves, creating a peaceful symphony. "Thank you," I whispered to David. "What for?" he asked with a smile. "For everything. For coming into my life. For loving me. For giving us a real family." David stopped and turned to look at me, his eyes full of love. "No, I should be thanking you. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a husband and a father. You and Leo are the most precious gifts my life has ever given me." He leaned down and gave me a soft, warm kiss. On his shoulders, Leo cheered. Behind us, my mother smiled contentedly. My life had been through a terrifying storm, and there were times I thought I would never stand up again. But after the rain, the ground becomes firm. After the storm, a rainbow appears, brilliant and beautiful. I had found my peaceful harbor, a family filled with love and laughter. I had become a confident, strong woman who knew how to love herself and was ready to embrace all the good things that lay ahead. My future was now wide open and full of sunshine.